The story inside that Indiana Fever locker room did not end with Dana Bonner's quiet departure. In many ways, that moment marked the beginning of something far more revealing, something that spoke to the true emotional architecture of a team built around one of the most polarizing, heavily scrutinized, and instantly influential rookies in modern basketball history. Because once Bonner left and the doors closed behind her, what remained were the players who understood exactly what this journey required. They were the players who stayed, who adjusted, who sacrificed, and who learned to coexist within a reality that suddenly felt larger than any one of them individually. As the season wore on, the Fever began to look less like a collection of mismatched timelines and more like a unit shaped by shared purpose. Even during the stretches when Clark was injured, the identity of the team started to settle into something clear, cohesive, and surprising. Players who once struggled to find rhythm without Clark discovered new layers of confidence. Players who spent months trying to understand their roles finally stepped into them with conviction. What emerged was a version of the Indiana Fever that no one saw coming, not even the franchise itself. Through all of this, the emotional tone of the team increasingly centered around Aaliyah Boston. While Clark generated headlines, Boston provided stability. Her calm presence balanced the storm. Her willingness to publicly uplift Clark dampened the noise that so often surrounds rising superstars. Her influence stretched far beyond rebounds and screens. She became the quiet heartbeat holding everything together. And what made her role so powerful was that she understood exactly what the stakes were. Boston knew what it felt like to carry a franchise. She knew the scrutiny. She knew the expectations. So when Clark arrived with unprecedented attention, Boston made a choice that set the tone for the entire locker room. She embraced the change instead of resisting it. Her leadership became even clearer behind the scenes. Players described how she would check in on teammates after practices, ask how they were adjusting to new rotations, and make sure no one felt left behind. In film sessions, she pointed out details not to embarrass teammates, but to build them up. During games, her communication with Clark became the engine that powered the offense. And as their bond deepened, the rest of the team followed suit. They watched how Boston interacted with Clark, how she celebrated her accomplishments, how she diffused tension, and how she grounded the locker room with maturity that extended far beyond her age. It became impossible not to feed off that energy. At the same time, Kelsey Mitchell's commitment to stay with the Fever began to look more and more like one of the defining decisions of the season. She had every reason to leave. She had every opportunity to take her talent elsewhere. Yet she chose to remain part of something that was still evolving, still unpredictable, and still unproven. There was no guarantee that the chemistry would work. No assurance that her numbers would remain high. No promise that playing alongside a megastar would not overshadow her own contributions. But Mitchell saw potential, real, tangible, long-term potential, and she believed in what the Fever could become if they stayed together long enough to build something meaningful. Her presence helped stabilize the offense during moments when Clark struggled with the adjustment to WNBA physicality. Mitchell's scoring, her shot creation, her ability to calm down the pace when things became chaotic, all of it made the Fever's system possible. And when she spoke about wanting one more year, she wasn't just talking about giving herself another shot. She was talking about giving the team another shot. Her loyalty became part of the team's culture, a reminder that progress takes time and that commitment matters. Then there was Lexie Hull, whose rise happened at the exact moment the Fever needed it most. Hull had every reason to be overwhelmed by the responsibility placed on her during Clark's absence. Instead, she stepped into the challenge with confidence and humility. She became the perfect example of what happens when a player embraces growth rather than fearing comparison. Hull's bond with Clark strengthened even while they weren't sharing the court. Their relationship was built not on stats, but on trust. Clark's support through humor, encouragement, and consistency meant something to Hull. It changed the dynamic of their friendship and their on-court chemistry. And when Clark returned, Hull didn't shrink. She adapted. She rediscovered the rhythm that made her effective with Clark in the first place. The Fever's transformation was not just about stars playing well together. It was about players understanding each other's humanity. It was about recognizing that the attention around Clark was bigger than any one teammate and deciding not to take it personally. It was about realizing that thriving alongside a superstar requires both confidence and humility. And as the season progressed, it became obvious that the Fever were becoming stronger not because of Clark alone, but because of how the team chose to respond to her presence. Meanwhile, Dana Bonner's departure hung in the air like an unresolved question. But for the remaining players, her exit became a clarifying moment. They realized that a player's resume does not guarantee a cultural fit. They realized that championship rings cannot replace the desire to be part of the grind. And most importantly, they realized that the team had reached a point where they could not force chemistry that wasn't there. Instead of fracturing, they tightened. Instead of losing focus, they sharpened it. They played like a group that had learned something essential about itself. Coach Stephanie White's influence cannot be ignored either. She understood that building a team around Clark required balance. She encouraged players to speak openly. She emphasized the value of roles. She redirected any jealousy into competitive energy. The Fever evolved under her leadership, learning not only how to coexist with the brightest spotlight in basketball, but how to use it to elevate their own games. By the time the season reached its later stages, the Fever were no longer defined by Clark's arrival alone. They were defined by the players who rose with her. They were defined by the unity that formed once they realized they didn't need everyone to stay, they just needed the right ones to stay. They were defined by a culture that valued honesty, growth, and shared responsibility. And that is what makes Indiana's story so powerful. Not the drama, not the tension, not the media narratives swirling around Clark, but the quieter truth that emerged when the noise faded. The truth that building around a generational player requires more than talent. It requires teammates with enough strength to stand beside the spotlight, not hide behind it. Enough humility to adjust, enough confidence to grow, and enough loyalty to stay even when things get complicated. Aaliyah Boston did that. Kelsey Mitchell did that. Lexi Hull did that. And because of them, the Fever didn't break under the pressure. They found their identity within it. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the dynamics behind one of the most fascinating teams in women's basketball, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and join the conversation below. Do you believe Boston, Mitchell, and Hull deserve more credit for shaping the Fever's culture? And how do you think Indiana will continue evolving around Clark moving forward? Let me know in the comments, and stay tuned for more powerful stories just like this.